Part 10. I've moved down to Dorset and I've tried to the best of my ability to work within the chef sort of industry. Um, got to head chef level and quit. So it's now 2008 and just coming up to summertime. So there's again I'm a bit confused state what to do. Me, Phil, and a couple of friends have been to a concert in Dublin, and summer's getting closer, and I'm still confused what to do next. Then, well, a bit of death of a friend. Then I got a phone call from my sister, which weirdly I was expecting a phone call. That morning I woke up hungover as usual, popped out to the shop to get a few bottles of wine, and walking back from the shop I had 3 bottles of wine in this carrier bag, and my sister, the eldest sister Karen, phoned me, and I thought, right, Mum's died, somebody's died, something bad. I knew it, because I woke up and I expected this phone call. It was really odd. And she so, the first thing I said is, okay, what's wrong? Who's dead? And she sort of was all quiet and said, well, you know your friend David? And I didn't know what David. I know lots of Davids. And I said, who do you mean? Well, his brother Andrew, and we worked, and yeah. And I'm like, well, Dave, I spoke to him yesterday. And I had spoken to Dave the day before. He lived in Edinburgh. He escaped Thurso and stayed with me for a brief period. In the late 90s, Dave moved down, to Edinburgh, and he loved it and had girlfriends. All the girls loved him. Very talented musician. Dave was my mate from a teenager. We were really close. And Karen phoned me and said, well, your mate Dave. I said, well, Keith's gone. I'm sorry to tell you he's gone. I said, no, I spoke to him yesterday. I kept thinking she'd got the wrong Dave, And she said, well, he died this morning. So I just completely lost it. I dropped to my knees and went home, and I was hysterical. Right? Why am I laughing? It's not funny. But yeah, that's life, Death is death, and people, it's when people die when they're just about to do something positive, or that's when I think it's unfair. I mean, death's going to come to us all, but Dave was just sort of in the middle of. He had a girlfriend at the time, and things seemed to be going really good when I spoke to him the day before, and then Dave died. He died. I didn't know what had happened at first, and it turns out it was an accident with drink and antidepressants he was just taking, and he died during the night. One of his flatmates came down and kicked the door in. They knew something was wrong, and he was dead. Dave was gone. So I went to the funeral in Edinburgh. Me and another good friend, who was very good friends with Dave as well, a guy called Johnny, another Thurso person who'd moved away. Johnny lived in Swansea. So me, Dave, and Johnny were like drinking, hardcore drinking buddies. In Edinburgh, me and Dave, early in our teenage years growing up, it was me, Dave, Johnny was with us most of the time. It was, we were good mates. So me and Johnny met up in Edinburgh, and then we stayed with this chap that I knew through Gaydar, a chap called Bill who lived in Lauder, which is just outside Edinburgh, fairly affluent area. And this guy I just met through Gaydar, and he put us up because I'd sort of lost touch with people in Edinburgh, and I thought, right, I can afford to go there and all this. I can't really afford hotels and all this jazz. So this guy said, look, I'm going to Lauder. I've got this place. We've got loads of rooms. You guys come and stay. So it's just, and he was a gem. He picked us up and he let us stay there. We went to Dave's funeral, and we got very, very drunk, and Dave's funeral was like a humanist thing. Dave wasn't religious, nor am I deeply religious, or following any strict code of religion, nothing like that. So we went to Dave's funeral, and Dave was gone. So we tried to keep it all positive and smile and celebrate his life, really. You know, I wrote here, Dave's funeral was wonderful. Dave didn't do religion, nor did I. It was a beautiful send-off with a huge crowd of wonderful people. His mum and dad and brother Andrew are all such beautiful people. They knew Dave had his troubles, and at the back of their minds maybe they knew Dave would die early, but we never really anticipated. So we did our time in Edinburgh. Strangely, this chap Bill in Lauder, who allowed me and Johnny to stay with him, about 4 days we stayed there, and Bill was this was his old family home. So he was an older chap, married with family in London, I think near London. But he was going to kill himself this on this trip. Bill told us the day after, he said he had this noose from the rafters and he was going to kill himself. And he said that me and Johnny visiting him, and with us losing our friend, stopped him from doing so. And he was quite serious about this. He showed us the noose and everything. He was going to kill himself. I tried to keep in touch with Bill from that point on, and Bill was a nice Scottish gent who just happened to live in England. Anyway, I'm rambling. See, I'm talking about death, so I'm losing the plot. So what happened then? David died. I got back home, and it was winter 2008 was coming up, and I got my shit together, sort of. And there was a job going next door to where we live. Again, another job on the doorstep at St Leonard's Hospital, which is literally next door. So I applied for an administrator job there, because I'm still good in the office. My talents really are office work, customer service, or the chef thing. But I did not. My last bout with the chef thing was, alright, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to put myself in an unsociable thing. To be a committed good chef, you need to have the talent and the determination and be able to do the hours. And I wasn't up for it. My mental state wasn't up for it. So they had this part-time job at St Leonard's Hospital, working in the wheelchair service, and I got the job. The problem was I had to wait 2 months to go through all the paperwork and all the references. I had to disclose my criminal record as well, and I explained to them, that was a once in a blue moon thing, and they accepted me. My boss to be Anne, and they really liked me and they wanted me to be there, so got that job. Started in January 2009, so that's me back into employment again after nearly 8 months of being unemployed. So yeah, it was a part-time job, and again I thought, right, I'm gonna build this up and get to full-time, and that's fine. Myself and Phil still got on reasonably well. We were drinking a fair bit. I was taking Phil out, and we were going out and partying, and I still, I was having my freedom to meet men around the Dorset area, so I was still doing the same old, being me, meeting different men. I had different people in my life, and over the years I had a very close friend, sort of pen pal, or internet pal, should I say, called Jack Smith, an American, who was a married chap in America, in Ohio area. And we were close in a sort of internet capacity. By this time, you could Skype and things, so it was a lot easier to communicate. So I got the job I started at the wheelchair service 2009, and during that year, one of the first physical things started to come up with me, something called piles and hemorrhoids, which is the annoying bleeding from the anus when you have a bowel movement. And at this time it was, I started to get bowel movements with blood, so I got a bit concerned and went to the doctor, and they had a probe, And I went forth to, I really do jump from one thing to the other, don't I? And we put me forward to get colonoscopy, a camera up my bum. And that discovered hemorrhoids, and they did a quick operation, something called a halo. Um, and then shortly after that, they did a surgical operation. But the piles were internal more than that, the bum area. So it was an internal thing. And those operations weren't painful, uncomfortable. But they weren't, horribly painful. But that was my first experience with piles, which over the years was going to come back and sort of haunt me again. So that was about 2009, 2009. So 2009, I've had a hemorrhoids operation. I'm working away at this new job in the wheelchair service. Great people I work with. It's like having the job I had at Edinburgh all over again with open-minded people, because I'm working with therapists and people in the medical profession, and generally they're open-minded. And they all knew I was gay, and that was not a problem. I got myself a BMX bike, and I was doing all these crazy things and trying to enjoy myself, really. 2009 Christmas time came, so I was going back home to Thurso to see the family for I'd left in 2006, so I was due a visit back. So I went back home for Christmas. 2009 Christmas was a nightmare. It was just a nightmare. I left on the 23rd. I had Christmas off work, so I left on the 23rd. Got drunk. There was a really bad winter. Got drunk before we even got on the plane. Got on the plane with some guy I'd been speaking to. Next thing I know, I woke up in Edinburgh Airport in some stairwell, and the police were waking me up. Somehow I got off the plane, got my luggage, got myself into the secure area of the airport, and at the time there was a big terrorist incident, so the police were freaking. They were freaked. They were like, "How did you get into this area?" And I had no fucking idea. A complete blackout. I remembered getting on the plane from Bournemouth to go to Edinburgh. No idea how I got off. Still to this day, not a clue. So the police were going to arrest me, or they sort of did arrest me, but didn't charge me. They had to phone my mum, phone Phil, and phone a few people to see I was who I said I was. They let me go. Then eventually I made it home for Christmas Eve, and made it home to mum, who was freaking out. And I had a very drunken, we had Christmas with the sisters, and it was quite good fun. I was very, very, very alcoholically drunk throughout the thing, and meeting up with people back home and just being a bit over the top, really. Had a big argument with my mum because she's just a pain in the butt, and I was being a pain in the butt, and two pain in the butts don't mix. So one thing I did sort of realise over that Christmas was, I thought, this is going to be my last Christmas with mum and the family. I sort of recognised that. It wasn't being dark. It was just a feeling, and I get these feelings, and usually I'm right. So that was that. I managed to get back home just for New Year's Eve, I think it was. I went to Edinburgh, got the plane back to Bournemouth, and made it back home to Dorset. Just fucked. I was just like, fuck Christmas, fuck my mum. She's just a pain. I was glad to be back home here, and to sort of escape and get back. So then we're into 2010, and more death was to come, with my mum this time. I knew she wasn't well. My mum had got emphysema, and my mum was also forced to retire from this lovely job she had. My mum always had to work. She had to be busy. She was very vain. She was losing self-respect. She had Henry, but didn't have Henry. She was gambling an awful lot, a lot more than I even knew. But I got a phone call from my sister in 2010, and they said, "You've got to get up here quick. Mum is very ill. She's in a coma." And we had to, between us, decide whether they were going to operate on mum. Her organs had started to shut down, But Mum was a thin, fragile woman, and she'd gone into a coma. And from what we understood, the surgeon said if we operate, she could be left um, like a vegetable in a care home. And my mum and my dad had this pact that they never wanted to be in a care home. They never wanted anyone looking after them. So that was quite an easy one. The decision was made that we were going to turn off her feeding tube, but actually saying it, um, and all three of us had to agree. Actually saying this, actually saying yes, turn it off. That was so difficult. That was so difficult saying the word, yeah, turn it off. Um, Even though we knew it was the right thing. So I had to get home because she literally had, what, maybe 2 days to live, 3 days. I jumped on a bus and I chucked a bunch of alcohol in there and got the overnight bus to Wick Hospital where she was staying. And I made it back home in time. Just made it home to the hospital late at night, and then she passed away the early hours of the morning. I watched her last breaths, and it was all very peaceful, and she was in no pain, and me and my sisters were very emotional, but she died peacefully. So, which is, if you're going to go peacefully. It's what my mum and dad wanted. They never wanted to be a burden on anyone. Dad sadly died at 56. My mum died, she was 66? 60. Yeah, I know this year she would have been 79. Anyway, 2010, my mum's gone. So we had to go back to the house, and we had to arrange the funeral, and I had to phone up work and say, look, I'm going to have 2 weeks off work. And we had to look at all of Mum's paperwork, which was huge. And Mum I knew she'd remortgaged the house once, but it turned out she'd remortgaged it twice or 3 times. So she basically left thousands of debt. She'd pawned things. She had some sort of shopping malady addiction. She'd just spent, and she died. Yeah. Long silence. I think I'll leave it there. We organised paperwork, and I was a pain throughout the week. I spent it just having to get drunk all the time, and we were clearing out things in Mum's house, and we have to decide. I was a bit of a pain, to put it mildly. My alcoholism, my drinking too much, did not do too well for the whole. It's the only way I could cope. Call me weak, call me alcoholic, whatever it was. I argued with my sisters on a couple of occasions about what kind of funeral we should have. It was just dumb family arguments. I had nothing. There's no way that I could save Mum's debt. It wasn't for us to pay, but what it looked like was definitely going to happen was the house was going to be repossessed by the company that she had remortgaged it with. So anyway, I had to go back home. We had the funeral, and we had the cremation, and all the nieces were there, and that was the last time I've been home. 2010 was my last visit home. It's now 2020 as I do this video. So I got back home, messy, and I got back to work.